Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome and hello. Welcome to the OGV Energy Live. My name is Eric Doyle and I'm thrilled to be back hosting our first live of the year. We did loads of these last year and we thought we would bring it back for 2023. So I'm glad you could join us, and we've got some people joining us already in the chat, which we'll say hello to quite shortly. This is an interactive show which brings you news and insights from the energy sector by bringing to life the UK's leading energy industry publication, of course, OGV Energy Magazine. So each month we have interviews, news and discussions with all of our partners from the publication and across industry to give you the very latest in news and opinions in a specific sector of the energy industry. This is an interactive stream, so don't be shy with your comments and questions, and I'll pick out as many as I can to put to our guests. We've already got some people coming in just now. Let's say hi to a few of them. 1 second, we've got... who was first in? Who was first in? Let's have a little look here. It was Alex. So hi to Alex Mercado. We've got, let me see, we've got Sam Taylor. Hello, Sam. We've got Omar. We've got Alexander. We've got Ian Gove, Wesley, Barry Young, loads of lovely people joining us for a very interesting chat this afternoon. So yeah, so this is an interactive stream. Don't be shy with your comments and we'll get them picked out as best we can. The best question of the afternoon will also win, this is a lovely touch, will win a half-page article or advert in a future edition of the magazine. Your marketing team will love it, so get those questions and comments coming in to all of our guests throughout the show. This month is the Subsea issue for the magazine, and it also happens to be the month of the first big in-person event for the energy sector in Aberdeen, with Subsea Expo at the P&J Live from the 21st to the 23rd of February, hosted as usual by the Global Underwater Hub, which is fantastic, just next week. With this in mind, we're delighted to welcome as our headline speaker today, Neil Gordon, the CEO of Global Underwater Hub, who's going to give us all the latest, what we can expect from the event, as well as updates on the very latest goings on in the subsea world. Then we're going to go into our In the Spotlight section, where we welcome organisations that are in the coalface of the subsea industry. Ryan Gordon from the National Subsea Centre is joining us. Tora Erneston, the CTO of ProServe, will be with us, and Ian Roger, the operations manager with JNS Subsea, is going to be joining in as well. Stay with us for that, and then we'll move into our Market Watch feature with the EIC and Westwood Global, giving us all the latest industry insight and project data. Before we kick off, I just wanted to let you know that we're having a really special little event around about Subsea Expo on the first evening, so that's Tuesday the 21st. We're going to be hosting a networking evening, and I've got a little flyer I can show you for that. Just give me 1 second. Here it is. So there it is. Tuesday the 21st of February, 7:30 p.m. till late. Live entertainment from Callum Michaels, who's going to be playing some music, and you need to experience this. The new OGV Taproom star mixologist, Ivan Tirshu, will be creating some amazing cocktails for you. Get yourself along. OGV Energy, www.ogvenergy.energy/events, and you can find the Eventbrite page. Get yourself signed up and come along. Just wanted to say thank you to our sponsors for this event, our platinum sponsor, Seatronics, our gold sponsor IK Group, and our two silver sponsors Drift Offshore and Marsh Commercial. So get your tickets secured, and I will see you there, because I'm going to go along. Absolutely, and we can say hello. We can put faces to internet profiles. Definitely. So remember, this is all about us. This is the energy community coming together. And keep in mind that the producers of this show are watching in the wings. So the best comments and questions of the day, your marketing team will love you, your management team will love you, will win that prize, a half-page advert or editorial. But let's get started, right? Let's get into this. You may know this person from his time as a commercial diver, or in his time managing the National Hyperbaric Centre. His career's seen him working and developing business across the energy centres of the globe, and he's played a crucial and pivotal role in securing the UK subsea to become recognised as a standalone industry operating in a diverse range of sectors. It is, of course, Neil Gordon. How are you, Neil?
Eric, I'm doing wonderfully well considering what a week we have ahead next week. So thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Have you got quite a lot on your plate over at the Global Underwater Hub right now? Quite busy?
It sounds like it. Yeah, there's quite a lot going on. I must say the activity in the office is fantastic. And yeah, it is a busy period for us just now. So yes, but I'm quite calm. As I say, the storm will be next week, but I'm sure it'll be a fantastic storm.
Oh, fantastic storm. Absolutely. Remember, everyone, he comes here at huge cost, huge cost to this show. So let's put him on the grill. You've got the man at the centre of well, we say UK Subsea, but it's international Subsea. I've travelled all over the world, and if I've been in the most far-flung reaches of the world, and you mentioned Subsea, and Neil Gordon's name comes up in the conversation pretty quickly. The last time we met was on this show pretty much at the same time last year when you were gearing up for Subsea Expo 22, right? So we've had, I can't actually believe it's an entire year. So how's the year been? What's happened? What's changed? What happened as expected? What was different? How's it been?
I think, in reflection, last year when we just started up the Global Underwater Hub, which was the transformation from Subsea UK into this new organization. When we look back, the timing for us was very spot on, because we came out of lockdown after being in lockdown for a couple of years, where it was like a hibernation. We'd seen COP26, which was very much a focus on the future being very much about energy transition and green and offshore wind. So the industry was all heading in a certain direction, or as we thought, a certain direction. And then lo and behold, Ukraine erupts, and the world goes into turmoil. So last year has been a very, very turbulent year in all shapes and sizes. And it's left a lot of uncertainty. And over the past number of months as well, I think we've seen quite a lot of change in policy and views on, things like oil and gas, and the challenge for energy transition and net zero. So that's the biggest challenge. I think last year we've seen has been so much change, and for industry, it's really understanding what the future holds. So for us, it's really to try and understand what that means for the subsea sector. So going through all that change, now what does the future look like? So essentially looking at what's happening next week, it's a good opportunity to start looking what the future holds. So last year, as I would say, very, very turbulent, very changeable, and a lot of uncertainty.
Crikey. So 2022, the year that's passed, clearly a year of transition for Global Underwater Hub, but also for the wider industries and extended industries beyond this one, right? Absolutely, the energy industry. How are you seeing the impact of that transition and the changes reflected amongst the membership community in the subsea sector?
Yeah, it's an important thing. I think we started on a transition as an organization quite a few years ago. And we're seeing this transition in industry, not only in energy, but across the whole wider subsea sector as well. Energy is a key part of that, but we're also seeing defense, aquaculture, communications, a lot to do with the subsea underwater infrastructure. But companies are actually going through that journey as well now. They're trying to find where they fit in that energy transition, and how they can adapt, and be part of that longer term strategy as well. Bigger companies need to invest quite early, but smaller companies are quite agile and can move around. So part of the industry at the moment is understanding what those opportunities and some of those other areas are. So we know oil and gas has been around, and it will be for many years to come, but it's going through a transition of trying to decarbonize net zero, and there's things that are coming through there that will provide a huge amount of opportunity. But things like carbon capture, storage, hydrogen, offshore wind, floating wind, all these areas are coming at us. But when, how big, and what does that actually mean for a lot of those companies? So that's really what we're looking at, is what does that mean for the companies, and helping them understand to make that decision on what direction they're going to go, because it is still not clear how big, when it's going to come through. We talk a lot more about the individual sectors, but I think when we look at all those different sectors coming at us, some are mature, some are very, very new, and some are quite well developed, but understanding what it means is the difficulty for some of those companies. So members are looking at how they are adapting to that transition and making their plans themselves.
Crikey, and it's a huge ask. If you've got very specific product and service lines that are very focused on a very specific part of the industry, you hear about diversification, you hear about pivoting, you hear about all of that. But there's real sort of mental wrestling going on with organizations about, as you say, we've got all these amazing opportunities. How do we get in? How do we get in, and how do we get started? And how do we become a credible player? Is a bit of a quandary for a number of the people that we're talking to right now as well, right?
So I think if you're looking at working into other sectors, diversification is the word that's used, or cross-sector. How do you move, if we're thinking about oil and gas, how do we move into things like offshore wind? Culturally, there's quite a change. So you might have technology or capability. But I would say that the subsea sector, if we look at the energy sector across, is probably the area that there has been a lot of diversification over the years, because the companies, and I'm sure many companies that are on listening to ourselves here, if we take underwater robotics, surveying the seabed, those companies have been surveying the seabed for many, many years for a multitude of sectors. So their technology has been the same technology as surveying the seabed for the pipelines, for laying the cables for offshore wind, for looking for unexploded ordnance, perhaps for putting in new wind farms. So there's already a huge amount of diversification in some of those areas. But some of the other companies who don't know how to do it where they fit in, that's where the likes of ourselves are trying to put a lot more granularity around, what the opportunities are and how they get into that supply chain opportunity and build their business as well.
Yeah, absolutely. My goodness me. So I did promise these lovely people that have joined us today. I did promise them that if they asked us a question, we would put it to you. Just before that, just wanted to say hi to our viewers from Nigeria. Hi to our viewers from Azerbaijan that have tuned in. Lovely to have you with us. We've got a question coming from Mark Cowison at LHR Marine. Question for Neil. Sourcing people, and in particular competent people, is still one of the largest challenges for our industry. Can you share what some of the members of Global Underwater Hub are doing to meet this challenge?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because we have got one of our special interest groups, our workforce sustainability, which is chaired by Fergal Brennan of Strathclyde University and led by Karen Summers. So some of the workshops that we've had is to look at what are the key issues that are coming up. Our members are coming up against, large companies, small companies all across the country. And attracting new people into the industry is one of the biggest challenges, because there's a lot of competition out there. So we've really got a great story to tell. And that story needs to be told to all different stakeholders. So for example, government, this is a great industry where we need to get people to be, let's say, skilled to work in and attract them into it. We've got to do things in outreach programs with schools. And a lot of our members are supporting the programs we do with primary schools and secondary schools. But if we think about what's happening in the middle, how do we actually start generating more capability in the existing workforce, but also attracting into those organizations as well. So what will happen, and what we're seeing happening over the period, is about reskilling and upskilling existing workforce, because as we transition and change, we talk about digital transformation and energy transformation. We need to think about how those people can transform as well in your organization, because technology changes and we've got to keep up with that. So trying to promote and upskill your existing people and skills is a very good way of doing it. But the question there was sourcing people.
Yes.
We've got a few programs on at the moment, which is bringing people back into the workplace that have not been in the workplace. So that's a pilot project that's just kicking off, and we're working with some companies at the moment. How do we bring them back in? And these are usually STEM, engineering, science, technology sort of background of people who have been away from the industry, bringing them in. And we're also doing something around the military side as well, because there's a great, let's say, source of skills that come out of the military side of things, who can work in, let's say, challenging environments, working away from home, overseas or offshore, who have already been transferring into our industry as well. So there's a few good examples, but there's a whole area of how do we attract people and bring them into the sector.
And I'm guessing it's going to be a point of discussion at the Subsea Expo next week. And I segue into that question I was about to ask. So, Subsea Expo getting underway next week. What can we expect? It's got a lovely title, Into the Blue. Tell us a wee bit more about that and what we can expect from the Expo.
Yeah, so Expo, Into the Blue, what that really means is there's two parts to it. Into the Blue, meaning into the blue economy. And the blue economy is that massive target that we get after. And without going into too much detail, blue economy, it's not a sector or an industry, it's an economy, and it's massive, but it includes everything to do with the oceans. The parts we are interested into the blue is under the water. So what does that mean? Let's look into the blue economy in the underwater space. So a lot of the themes will be coming through in what we're doing in aquaculture, offshore wind, oil and gas, CCUS, hydrogen. So it's really having a good look at that. But into the blue has another meaning as well. into the blue abyss is almost like looking into the unknown. What does it actually mean? Because the future is not as clear. So we're trying to put through the debates and the discussions that are going on, is to try and understand what does the future look like, and how can we help an industry navigate some of the challenges and opportunities ahead. So that's what the wraparound Into the Blue is all about. But it does really look at blue economy and into the future of the unknown in the sea.
Fabulous, fabulous. I can't wait to see it. I'm going to head along myself this year. You've got about 150 exhibitors, a hugely busy conference program, and thousands and thousands of people coming to this event. How busy are the next couple of days for you next week going to be?
It's going to be a busy time for the whole team. And we expect, I think we've got over 3,500 pre-registered to attend, and that's a good sign. We hope to get somewhere about up to 6,000 over the 3 days. There's visitors from about 50 countries, and includes, I've got a list here of some of the countries: Norway, Netherlands, United States, Italy, Denmark, Australia, Brazil, Germany, France, Poland, but 50 countries. So it's a real international flavour to it, coming to Aberdeen, to this facility. And there's some great programmes that we have on as well. And I wasn't going to go through the whole project, but the conference themes: offshore wind, cable technology, vessels, doing business, finance, international business. There's a whole program which is all online there. So there's going to be a lot of discussion, a lot of debate, but I really think it's going to be a place to do business as well. And that's when you get the best part of 150 plus exhibitors and a lot of people in the room. We do expect a lot of business to be done as well. So although there's trying to look at the future and what it holds, on the actual exhibition floor, we do find that the exhibition is a place that business is actually done. Orders are actually being taken, we hear, but it's where real relationships are being developed. And we've got a lot going on as well in the awards dinner, which is held on the Wednesday. Probably have between 400 and 500 people attending that.
And I'm particularly fascinated by your speaker at that event, who I'm a huge fan of. Tell us a bit more about who you've secured.
Well, we've got Dr. Maggie Adairn Pocock, who's the space scientist, and most people might recognize her from The Sky at Night. She's a real enthusiastic, fantastic person to have there. And I spoke to her a couple of weeks ago, and she's going to come round and walk around the exhibition and meet a whole host of the organizations. And then she's going to give us a fantastic address to the audience at the awards dinner. So I'm really looking forward to introducing her and hearing what she's got to say. But also, as well, the following day, Maggie's agreed to help with the outreach programs that we're doing with students and schools.
Oh, wow.
So we've got a lot more going on the next day, and she loves getting involved in that side of things as well. So, I suppose in answer to one of the earlier questions, we really do reach out to try and bring in the younger generation, but bring in some of these fantastic, high-profile people to really engage and inspire some of these youngsters and look at what they can do. And I suppose, giving a little hint of the flavour of where Maggie sort of comes from. Maggie's passion is outer space. My passion is inner space. So when you're looking at the two sort of extreme environments, it really is a lot of similarities there. So we'll hear a lot more about that in the night.
So we'll see you on your forthcoming Netflix special, Subsea at Night.
Thank you.
Another question from the floor. Unfortunately, if you drop your name in and let us know who this is, it's come up as LinkedIn user. I can send you a little thing to help you with that. But so Mark's question was about sourcing talent. How do we keep people and retain talent in oil and gas in these post-COVID challenging times, says LinkedIn user. Let us know who you are. So there's the issue of bringing people in and attracting people to, how do we keep the people we have?
Well, I think part of the challenge historically in oil and gas, it's been a very cyclical industry. There's been highs and lows, and there's no doubt about it. The reputation has been quite difficult when you go through a high and a low, and then we've lost a lot of people to other industries. But oil and gas industry was a very high-paying, a very attractive industry to bring in people because it paid very highly. Yeah. Other industries now are competing, so it's not just about paying the top dollar. It's about making sure that we've got career paths for those people and long-term opportunities, because we've seen the volatility that can happen with oil and gas, with oil price, that sometimes, where there's a real desperation to get a lot of people into the industry. And then when the oil price went down, then we've seen a lot of people leaving the industry. But quite a lot of people have left the industry and perhaps not have come back. So I think we've got a job, not us alone, but industry. If we think about oil and gas, the industry have got a real hard job to try and say, this is a very stable career, long-term career proposition for people in the industry, and you should stay here. But also, how do you retain people in the industry, particularly when it comes to oil for subsea? Subsea, people who work in the subsea industry have already been transitioning very seamlessly across to renewables and offshore wind. And I mentioned them like surveying and subsea operations, because a lot of those engineering and technology and skills are very, very transferable. So the industry has to look at where they're going on their journey, as I talked about earlier on, a transition as an organization. As this organization transitions, your career will be able to transition, and we will reskill and develop you to be able to give you a long-term career. So I think that's what industry needs to do. We've got to tell the story and have a clear path from a strategic point of view of the vision of the organization, but also for their staff and their personnel to make sure that they buy into it and they say, yes, they're looking after me. I can see where I'm going with the organization.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Great question from LinkedIn user. Let us know. I think it's Jamie Watson. Jamie Watson from James Fisher. Keep your questions coming in, please, and we'll put them to Neil. Now, if I know anything about Global Underwater Hub, it's that you guys don't sit still for too long. I'm guessing that you've got grand plans for 23. Are you able to share any of those with us?
Well, yes, of course. I mean, our main objective is part of, at the heart of what we do is about market intelligence to understand where the opportunities are and help us really build that. We grew up in an oil and gas industry many years ago and then transitioned into the hub. But part of that is that the industry is across the UK. Global means it's a global marketplace. Underwater means the domain, and the hub is the UK. So to join up the UK, the community that we work with, we have two other facilities we're building. We've built one in West Hill here, which is a fantastic facility, which has got TV studio capability, conference facility. It's got hot desking for members. We've also got a property in Newcastle, which we're just starting to fit out at the moment. And we've also got one in Bristol, which we will be fitting out and getting ready. So we'll have two hubs, which will be the go-to place to go and find out about what's happening, events, linking up. And we can do things up and down the country like question time. So listen, having a conversation here, I could be speaking to somebody down in Abbey Wood in Bristol about a defence project that they're working on something. It could be something in the northeast of England, with some of our partners down there, what's happening in the offshore wind side of things. So creating this infrastructure of hubs. We've got 3 hubs being created around the UK, and they should be all in place by early summer.
Very, very good indeed. I love this little this forum. I love this show. You get everything. Ian Gove's telling us that there's 30 jobs currently available at Aker. If you want to apply, click on this click on this link. Ian doesn't miss an opportunity. Ian doesn't miss an opportunity. Well done. Very good. Very good. Right. So that's the plans for GUH. Where does the big question for those of us that grew up in oil and gas and sort of latterly made the transition into other sectors of the industry and renewables or whatever that might be? The big question is, if we could get under the skin, where does realistically oil and gas sit for the future of Global Underwater Hub? I guess it's the question on whenever we have someone who runs a membership organisation or an institution or a government body and they're in energy. We always ask the question about where does oil and gas absolutely sit front of mind with that. So where is oil and gas for you guys?
Yeah, so oil and gas has been, and always will be for many years, a very significant part of the sector for our members and our underwater industry. And how we position the Underwater Hub, it's not an oil and gas trade body. It's not an offshore wind. It's an underwater trade body association, which helps the supply chain. So the supply chain doesn't belong to any particular sector. And I think that's one of the key things. We've got to think oil and gas is a very important part and will continue to play an important part for us and for many others. But it's about a transition. And I talk about energy transition or an industry transition. We have transitioned, and so are many other companies transitioning. But oil and gas is on a transition. And it's going to take a long time for that to change when things like hydrogen, CCUS, floating offshore wind, all these other opportunities are coming, but they're not at the scale yet that are going to create a huge amount of value for the supply chain. There's a whole host of challenges in there that we're trying to deal with and help the industry understand. So when we've got a capability that supports an oil and gas industry, and it will continue to do so, our main objective is to make sure we've got pipeline of projects and opportunities for the supply chain. And some of those new industries are still embryonic and will not deliver anything of value for a number of years yet. So we've got to make sure that our supply chain have still got plenty to do. So oil and gas, as we know, is still going to play a huge part going forward. And if we think what happened last year with the Ukraine situation and a few other things around the gas price, etc., resilience, energy security, all these things are playing a part in what policies and what happens at regulatory level within the framework. And we are not the investor. The investors in these big projects are the major operators, and we certainly work with a lot of operators, but it's more around the operational and technical challenges we work with. They'll have the challenge with the policymakers and Treasury and with government. Oil and gas is certainly going to be an important part of us going forward, but what we try and do is how do we decarbonize that industry? It's on a net zero journey over the coming years, and so how do we actually start to reduce the carbon footprint in offshore operations, both in installation and operations, but also in things like operations and maintenance, like inspection and maintenance going forward.
And you mentioned some challenges there, Neil. What do you see as the key challenges for the subsea industry going forward?
So going back to the first point, I think some of the major challenges for industry at the moment is the direction of some of these opportunities, I would call it, these sectors. What's happening? How do we make decisions to invest in new vessels or new factories or new people, or invest in a technology that can do something perhaps in offshore wind or wave and tidal, hydrogen perhaps? It's quite confusing and it's not quite clear. So an industrial strategy is really what we need, quite clear for a lot of these things and what that means for the supply chain, and then helping our supply chain adapt, invest, and be ready for that. But we've got to make sure we know when those opportunities are coming and be quite geared up for that. But some of the shorter term things is really about the market intelligence. That's what we're really growing on. How do we get people talking? How do we identify some of the problems? So some of the problems we've heard over the past couple of years is that we don't have enough cable manufacturers for the offshore wind industry. We don't have enough vessels for the installation of floating offshore wind and fixed wing. There's a number of areas in there. So how do we actually start speaking to government and speaking to the investors and supply chain to help them make that what we call enterprise level investment? If we don't start investing in some big ticket items, we're not going to be at the front of the queue when those projects come through. And the challenge for some of the big investors is the certainty of those projects that are coming through. We know there's X amount of gigawatts coming through and there's projects, but how many of those projects are going to get right through, and when's that going to deliver something? Because if we need to go and spend hundreds of millions on some new vessels, it's going to be a real challenge to convince the corporates to take a risk. So we need more certainty in some of those things.
The subsea industry's always been at the forefront when it comes to technology. Where do we go from here in terms of technology development? What can we expect to see coming down the pipeline? Excuse the pun.
Yeah. Okay. So where we are, and I think some of the drivers for technology at the moment, if we look at the current industry, if we think about a lot of the subsea infrastructure and oil and gas, it's how to decarbonize that. So there's been a real move around to maintain infrastructure with a much smaller carbon footprint. So we're seeing things like remote operations, over the horizon flying of ROVs. We're seeing smaller, more compact, smarter technology through water communications, visualization, digital twins. So there's a real push in trying to reduce the carbon footprint. And that might mean we're not seeing as big a vessel or as big an ROV, for example, to do jobs when doing more fit for purpose type technology. And we're seeing that. Still a big need for the big construction type, but when it gets to let's build something that's a bit more fit for purpose. So there's a real drive on looking at how to be smarter technology. So remote, over the horizon, operations and autonomous operations as well. How we use data and how we can analyze and how we do intervention only when it's necessary. I think the other thing that, I find a big opportunity for us in the short term, certainly in the subsea space, is the floating offshore wind sector specifically. So much of the technology that we have developed over the years, subsea for oil and gas, is transferable. If you think about floating structures, floating FPSOs, but you've got floating wind structures, they need to be marshaled, handled, positioned. They need anchor systems, mooring systems. They need dynamic cables like umbilicals to transfer the electricity. So there's a whole plethora of opportunity in that. And that's what I think we'll really see an opportunity to make sure the UK is the world leader in floating offshore wind. Building the structures is a real challenge. It's a very competitive market internationally, and we're certainly not the cheapest. We would like to see some being built, but that's not something we can export. We can export the underwater technology, and that's what I think we'll really see some strong growth is in underwater and the floating offshore wind coming soon.
Excellent, excellent. Question coming from Sam Taylor. I don't think we'll get it all on the screen. Maybe we will. Neil, can you say how the GUH interacts with other regionals or support sectors such as DCOM North Sea or Net Zero Technology Centre or beyond to identify the challenges that engage with the supply chain? So how does it all fit together in terms of collaboration?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at some of those ones that are mentioned there, we've got lots and lots and lots of relationships. In one of our organizations, I think I just signed an MOU. You'll be speaking to Ryan, I think, later on from the new National Subsea Centre.
He's
do we
nodding.
work?
He's nodding in the green room.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So how do we work with those other organizations? Net Zero Technology Centre. Yeah. Now, the Net Zero, they've got some key things at early research. We're very much focused on the commercial end of the spectrum. So looking at what are the big challenges and where are the opportunities? Now, the principle we use in technology, for example, is adopt, adapt, create. If there's something out there already, you adopt it. If there's something out there that could perhaps do it, but it needs to be tweaked a little, you adapt it. And that's maybe something like going from oil and gas to floating offshore wind. And if there's a white space, then you create. And that's where we're working with other sectors and saying, look, you've got the same problem that this sector is trying to solve. How do we actually solve this together? So we start doing cross-sector collaboration to solve that problem. Like things that we want to do is remote power underwater. How do I power my data collection systems from my salmon farms that are getting further and further offshore, which also have mooring systems, etc. So there's a lot of different areas that we start talking to. So DCOM North Sea, I'm speaking to Sam. I was supposed to speak to him last night about him doing something with me in Australia. So we do talk and we are communicating, but the common thread for the Global Underwater Hub is underwater. Don't forget, it's only the underwater part, and that's where it runs across those sectors. So if it's decommissioning is very much the vertical, full spectrum. We're interested in the underwater part. The same with oil and gas, it's the underwater part. Defense, aquaculture, it's that slice that cuts across. So that's how we join up those parts across those different sectors, because often or not, they don't speak in the verticals, but we do across the water.
Very good. Thank you for that. Last question for you, and I'm not sure if you're able to talk to this question in depth, but I noticed a really interesting top build conference session right after the plenary session on day one: security of critical national infrastructure. Now, it seems with all that's been going on in the press and all that we hear about in the industry news, that the issue of security subsea infrastructure is becoming a more important focus area.
Yeah, I think it's always been there. There's always been how vulnerable, what do we have there? And because it's out of sight, it's almost out of mind. But I think an incident which happened not too long ago, the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which was, after the Swedish investigation, found out it was a sabotage. And there's lots of press covering, what actually happened there. And I don't think there's any, concrete evidence of who's to blame, etc. But that certainly raised the question of what do we have out there? And that was one of the things that we've been interested in. And we're also talking with a number of organizations at certain levels. So we were wanting to bring a session together to look at, well, what does the subsea infrastructure look like around the UK? Possibly, what are the risks involved and what are we doing about it? So that's the session. And we will have representatives from OEUK, who are obviously representing from an oil and gas perspective, from offshore wind, from renewable UK, and we've also got from the European subsea cables to look at what parts of infrastructure are down there and how we're dealing with it. But we've also got some experts from a defence perspective and looking at some of what's happening. How do we protect and how do we countermeasure any of the threats that are down there? And it's interesting as well, which is well known in the public domain, that the Royal Navy have in commissioning 2 vessels, one at the moment, I think, is down in Liverpool, 2 of these subsea surveillance vessels, which have got capability to survey our subsea infrastructure and look at how to protect it. So watch the space. There's a lot happening in that space. And there's also an underwater unmanned sub being commissioned as well. And again, they're in public domain, but there's quite a lot of other stuff, interesting conversations going on. So this is the first part of us, starting to say, let's realize what we have there. We've got quite a lot of infrastructure. There's more and more going on all the time. How do we actually start looking after it and protecting it and making sure it's safe? Other things, there was a good paper actually written a few years ago by Rishi Sunak, of all people, current Prime Minister, in 2017, and it looks at subsea cable infrastructure vulnerability, and it's an interesting paper. I would recommend, if you ever get a chance, go and have a look at it.
Yeah, we'll do. Will do. Hey, listen, thank you so much for joining us and taking time out of what must be a particularly busy week. All the best to you and the team for Subsea Expo next week. We hope it's a roaring success. And if you have any further questions for Neil, connect with him. You know where he is. It's Neil Gordon, Global Underwater Hub, and I'm sure he will help you out. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you took time to join with us today, and thanks for taking the questions from our lovely viewers as well. We'll see you again, hopefully before next year's Expo.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Eric. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. See you soon, Neil. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. That was excellent. I'm sure you'll agree. Thanks to everyone who put their questions and comments in even if it was just to say we're looking for people, which is great. Absolutely. Thank you to John and Ian for doing that. We're moving on to the industry spotlight section of our show. So we're going to welcome someone that was mentioned just a wee minute ago, Ryan Gordon, BD Manager at the National Subsea Centre, Tora Ernston, CTO of ProServe, and Ian Roger, Operations Manager at JNS Subsea. I've got to just adjust my view just a little bit. Tora, welcome. Ryan, welcome. And Ian, welcome. How are you?
Good, yourself, Eric?
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us today. What a great headline interview with Neil just before Subsea Expo next week. Did you get anything from that? Because you guys were all sitting in the green room.
Yeah, it was super interesting. A lot there to be said about the the diversification and certainly the personnel issues that people are, the resourcing issues that companies are experiencing at the moment. So yeah, it's good to hear Neil's experience on that, and also good to see that we've got, as an industry, we've got a good way forward as well.
Yeah, brilliant. So thanks for joining us. This is the part where we talk to people that are at the coal face and explore this a wee bit more. We're going to start with Ryan, if that's okay, because this is something really interesting to a lot of us. So, BD Manager at the National Subsea Centre. You had your official launch recently. Tell us all about the National Subsea Centre, Ryan, and what you guys are all about.
Yes, so thanks for having us on, Eric. The centre is a partnership between the Net Zero Technology Centre and Robert Gordon University, and it's kind of partially funded through the Aberdeen City deal. But the aim of the centre is really to help accelerate the energy transition, and we do that by working with industry and applying smart technologies such as data science, artificial intelligence, new imaging and material technologies, and we predominantly focus, on the subsea, hence the name, and related marine sectors. But our capabilities cover a lot more kind of industrial sectors from that, agriculture, energy sector, and defence. We've got a team of 40 people at the centre in Dice. 30 of those would be academic researchers. From PhD student level, seasoned research fellows, all the way up to the kind of professorial level who are running our research programs. I won't go into the details of the programs as such. A lot of that information is on the website, but we've got 4 kind of programs. One's integrated energy, second's transparent ocean, third one's net zero operations, and we're working on a 4th one called cyber physical systems, which kind of ties back into some of the stuff Neil was talking about, that security. More and more things are being sensorized, so it's a place where you can become under kind of threat. So operational technology security is of more and more importance nowadays. But as I said, more information is on the website with regards to the centre.
So companies can come to you. You've got those 30 analysts sitting there in DICE, working away on hugely complex analytical issues to provide data and information to companies. I'm guessing that's not free.
Well, no, it's not free. Nothing's for free, I suppose.
Nothing's for free, but you've got a mechanism to be able to help companies with this, right?
Yes. So there's various ways to kind of fund what kind of research you maybe need done for your business. So we can you can fund that directly, I suppose, with us, or there's other government kind of funding coming out, or Innovate UK or Net Zero Technology calls, Net Zero Technology Centre calls. So we can work with you to kind of shape a compelling proposal, which we can then apply for funding for. But we're also setting up a kind of anchor partnership model. So companies who really want to work with us, support academia, develop that future workforce. You can invest a certain amount of money, form part of the steering committee, but it gives you access to a number of I suppose researchers throughout that year to do your R&D.
Very good, very good. So you're at the centre of this. You're at the core of all of this. You've got all this analysis and data mining that you guys are doing. What challenges do you see in the industry, and what kind of things do you think that businesses can be doing to help enable some of these future technologies and solutions?
Data is probably the word that you mentioned is probably the big thing. But again, going back to some of the stuff that talking about before, there's going to be a lot of robotics and autonomous solutions used in the future.
Right.
The world's becoming more and more complex and faster moving. So, the big thing we need now is data. There's a lot of these computational techniques which will enable some of these autonomous solutions or these automated inspections. But without data, we can't, apply the kind of machine learning techniques to that data to help us, automatically, I suppose, identify, classify, and ultimately take that decisive action that we might need to do on, an identified anomaly. I know there's a lot of concern in industry about sharing data.
Yeah.
That's, everyone's worried about it, and especially if it's their dirty laundry. I'll kind of say, let's say corrosion on pipelines, for example.
Yep.
But without getting loads of video footage or imaging of corrosion on pipelines, how do we do these computational techniques to kind of train algorithms to identify that automatically? So people coming up with these technologies don't really care about who the data belongs to. It can be anonymized, cleaned up, but it's always going to be stored in a safe and secure manner. So there's no need to be worrying about that. But
so how can people, if any of our viewers or any one of our viewers' friends that they mention this to and think, well, a big data analysis project would really help us in business planning and new markets and new sectors and new technology. How can they get to hear more about this? How can they find out more about the funding that you mentioned earlier on? And how can they engage with you guys?
Yeah, if you just reach out to me via LinkedIn, either message me through there, or my email address is actually on my profile, or I suppose contact us through our contact us section of the website. But we will be at Subsea Expo. That's going to be our first, kind of
Public outing.
event. So we've got a stand there. So please pop in past and just have a chat with one of the team.
Absolutely brilliant. You heard it here first. If you're in the subsea world and you're thinking about how we could get more analysis, more data, get in contact with Ryan, BD manager at the new National Subsea Centre. Thank you very much, Ryan.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, that was brilliant. Tora, very good of you to be with us today, all the way from Norway. How's the weather today?
Wow, it's at least you have some snow, and there is more snow in the forecast. So yeah, it's promising. But
absolutely, my goodness.
Thanks for the invite as well to be.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Thank you for joining us. So most of the people watching this show today will know the name ProServe. Will know that you guys have been providing subsea distribution systems for decades, right? But there's been some change in how you upgrade subsea systems, some significant change over the last few years. Can you tell us a little bit more around that?
Yeah, so as you say, we have been in the control business for many years. We did actually, back in early 2012 or something, we could see that we got challenged by some of the operators that started to challenge the norm and wanted to do things differently. The reason was that I think in the industry at that point in time, there was that they had equipment they had to upgrade, and there was a lot of, I would say, almost throw away and buy brand new equipment.
Yeah.
And then they asked for getting help, though they normally get that feedback that they needed to do an upgrade. That might be two different reasons why they had to do that. There might be obsolescence, there might be other technical issues. So we're thinking at that point in time, how do we disrupt and how can we make something to help the industry to think different? So the challenge we got was in that point in time was how could we make a system that could be so flexible so we can adapt to different scenarios or technologies and upgrade only what you need to upgrade. Because a lot of the systems will be still in a good shape. It might be only electronics, it might be some parts that is broken. So you can actually, instead of doing a change out, you can do an upgrade of the actual module itself, which means that you can reuse most of the larger parts and also then down to both the CO2 footprint and also cost. So you can think smarter. So that was the start of it. And then we have done, since then, though, we have had many projects where we have actually been capable of installing this and changing the way of thinking.
So operators changing their strategies and perhaps traditional approaches to this. Was it easy? Was it an easy sell, or did you face any barriers along the way?
Yeah, no, that was not an easy sell, and because the OEMs, though, they didn't probably like that we changed the norm.
Yeah.
Because they had an interest in them doing the upgrade and continuing. So when we got on board, we got challenged with everything from copyrights. How do you get information, documentation, what about patents? What about so we had a lot of sessions with the companies to ensure that we're doing this process in a proper way, though. So we have made a process that we can follow to ensure that we are following all the right steps we want to take on this kind of. I mean, so the larger operators also see the benefits, so they have been really helpful to develop a framework that makes this possible. But it was definitely not easy. It wasn't in the beginning.
No, I can imagine not. Has this forced you and your colleagues and the wider company to think about technology in a different way?
Yes, and that's a good question, because the way we, especially around, we have to adapt to a lot of different scenarios, and we need to think smart. So we can, instead of reinventing stuff, we need to be having a flexible, configurable solution. So the base things you have, especially on communication, because a lot of this stuff is on the seabed. So we need then to have a strong communication platform in all of these projects to ensure that you can configure and adapt what's down there already. Because if you do an upgrade, you will normally live together with other equipment from the OEM. So that we have spent a lot of effort in making systems that actually can happily coexist and live together. So we have spent the last 10 years to enhancing these offerings to be in such a good shape that they are today. So a lot of effort.
Very good, very good. Thank you for that. Neil Gordon mentioned earlier on us thinking smarter. When we talk about smarter, cleaner, more efficient subsea operations, what does smarter and cleaner in terms of subsea operations actually mean when it comes down to metrics and measurable areas?
Well, because it's down to, so I think there's been some good input also both from Ryan today as well is to get data and to be smart and to do upgrades when you need to. So if the system will work and you can predict when something will happen, if you then can share data and you can use that intel to plan, then also you can do the upgrades instead of rushing. And that's over here, so it's been urgency, because if you have a problem, you would like to solve that problem as soon as possible if it just happens. If you can predict, then you can also plan and you can take some measures to make, you can ship it when you have additional space and you can plan it. You don't need to rush. And I think we had quoted on the calculations that if you can save up to like 56% of CO2 with less maintenance and with also the reliability. If you install something that can last much longer, plus you can also do an upgrade when you can plan it, is quite a big saving. Because over a 25-year lifespan, this, which is planned for a normal module, it will be a big saving. It will.
Very good. Now, I'm guessing the fact that you're a chief technology officer, you're obviously a big fan of data and have been your whole life. So the power of data in helping us make those cleaner, smarter, more efficient solutions. I'm guessing data is right at the core here, right?
Data, the power of data is to the core. Data, and to your point, is also my background. It is highly important. There's a couple of elements we have to address. It's first to get access to the right data and then to utilize. We have had like machine learning, AI, and a lot of other stuff we have used that since almost like the 70s, but it's to get access to the right data, to analyze them in the right way, so the operators can share that information. And then we can use that to optimize in a really efficient way. The other part also, which is highly important now, is also cybersecurity. Based on what's happened over the last couple of years, especially when it has changed, is to ensure that all data is secure. And if you then also put on technology, making that waterproof, that you can actually utilize that without being exposed, this is really, really important. Yeah. And then you can use that to improve both on the carbon footprint and also optimize life of fields and assets. Yeah.
Fantastic. So you can see how this is all coming together. It all fits together beautifully. Thank you very much, Tora. Thanks for joining us today. And thanks for those excellent answers to those questions. We do have some questions coming in for this team, which I'll keep to the end. So thank you for, and please do continue to put questions in the comments there, and I'll put them to the team. We're going to move to Ian, who's been sitting there patiently, just waiting for his moment in the sun. Thank you, Ian. Ian, the operations manager at JNS Subsea. Can you just remind us and remind our viewers what specific area of Subsea it is that you guys at JNS focus on?
Of course, yeah. Thanks for having me today. So yeah, JNS Subsea, we've been in one shape or form for over 20 years. Providing subsea energy solutions to the industry. In our current guise, we've been going since 2020, which was a part of a management buyout from the parent company, and primarily previously focused on subsea distribution systems. Right. But we're now getting involved in full subsea control systems as well, high voltage connection systems, custom one-off engineering and design and manufacturing solutions. So we're really kind of covering, the kind of broad spectrum now. Yeah. Really broad spectrum compared to, just the kind of the basics, which were kind of, I guess, probably well known for previously.
Yeah, fantastic. Tying into what Tora was saying about being more efficient and being able to extend life and things like that, and also a subject that we've focused on previous editions of this show is the fascinating and wonderful issue of the circular economy, which I know that you guys are quite actively looking at. What does circular economy mean to you in Subsea terms?
So yeah, here at JNS, we believe we're kind of pioneering the circular economy as part of the kind of subsea controls sector goes. So we have our own proprietary portal called Legacy Locker, which is where we supply new and also refurbished and new old stock equipment, and we can utilize quite a large stock level that we hold to provide quick turnaround times, reduce costs, and a lot of configurability as well, and one-off unique solutions. So yeah, we've got a lot of equipment there that we acquire through various different means. Some of it's been used subsea, some of it's project leftover stock, some of it's been acquired through sometimes new stock that's been superseded as well, but it's still relevant within the industry. So, so yeah, we've got quite a large base to pick from there, and we can either refurbish, we can repurpose, we can recycle. So yeah, quite a broad range of what we can do with subsea equipment. And also one of the main things there, as I mentioned, the cost and the reduction in lead times. Quite a significant saving in the carbon footprint as well compared to manufacturing new equipment.
Neil mentioned right at the head of the show that whole issue of diversifying, pivoting products and services, whatever you might call it. Have you experienced the need to diversify over the last few years? Is that something that's front of mind for you guys?
Yeah, totally relate to what Neil was speaking about there. Yeah, and all those points hit home. So you really need to stay ahead of the curve, especially when you're a small company. You maybe don't have unique products that are proprietary that have been known for decades and decades. So we're always constantly looking to stay ahead of that curve and to see what the next big thing is, and make sure that our product line is constantly developing. And actually, recently, not quite ready for the full press release yet, so I can't give you too many details. But we've recently acquired a subsea controls company. So we've got their IP and their assets, and some of their employees moved across as well. So we've gone from this previously focused on the subsea distribution side to being a full OEM essentially now for subsea control systems.
Crikey. We love a scoop. We love a scoop on this show. We love a scoop. Fabulous. Now, acquiring companies, new products, new services, becoming an OEM gives you ESG problems. Well, not problems, challenges, right? How does a company such as JNS deal with environmental, social, and governance issues? Because it's all front of mind for lots and lots of us these days, right?
It is, yeah. I mean, ESG was a new thing to me until someone simplified it and said it's essentially corporate social responsibility plus. So awesome. Go and that little bit extra. So we recently employed a full-time ESG advisor / coordinator. So she's Carvey's fully up to speed with the legal side, the governance side, how we can basically improve rather than take. We want to make a positive impact on the local community, on our employees, and on how we impact the world. So some of that fits in with what we were speaking about with the legacy locker and the reusing of equipment. There's a greatly reduced carbon footprint that we can offer our customers. That all fits in with the ESG. We also work well with the looking towards a diverse workforce, ensuring we've got a good, happy workforce there as well. We focus on employee well-being, that sort of thing. So yeah, I think it's something that actually when we discuss our ESG policy with a lot of our customers, they're actually not quite as up to speed as we are on it. So it's one of those kind of things that we feel like we're paving the way for some of the bigger companies to take the lead from, which is good.
Very good. Very good, very good. Hey, we love a business development opportunity on this show. I've got a question in from Claire Hepworth at Repsol Sinopec, and this is very direct for you. I've got a question for Tora just after this. Does the legacy locker only deal with subsea equipment?
It does, yes. Unfortunately, yeah, it's only subsea equipment at the moment. Yeah, that's for the moment. But you know, if we change from a GNS subsea to GNS all encompassing, then I'm sure that's something we'll look at in future.
And there's a magical little conversation for you to have with Claire at Repsol. Claire, thank you for sending that through. I'd like to finish off with you guys, if it's okay. Tora, I have a question for you, if that's okay, from Mark Cowison. Post-COVID, supply chain challenges have affected every business one way or another. Can you share ProServe's, in this instance, your company's biggest supply chain challenges at this time, and basically how you're dealing with that?
That is a really good question, to be fair, and I think most companies have been struggling post-COVID. So we have, in supply chain, though, we have putting in place quite a program to try to help on this, and that is to get hold of stock and try to be smart, get things in time, but it's to plan a robust, let's say, policy how to do this. So right now, we had, also before, I say we had over the last year, so is to have to secure all supply chain we need for any project and all that. So a lot both on electronics has been a problem, as you know, especially over the last 2-3 years. So stocking, having agreements with suppliers, have alternatives. It's to yes, and this is essential for us as a company, but also has been more challenging over the last 2 years. So really good question, and a lot of effort is going into this today. Yes.
Absolutely. All linking back to good data, good planning, and good foresight. Very, very good indeed. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. If you have heard something from Tora, Ian, or Ryan that you'd wish to extend the conversation with, take a little note of their names. You can see which companies they're from. Connect with them, extend the conversation. That's what this is all about. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, and all the best. We'll see you shortly.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. So that was our industry spotlight section of the show. We are moving on to Market Watch, where we bring you all the latest in data and analysis and projects in the industry. We're going to welcome Neil Golding from the EIC, who is right here, and Mark Adioson from Westwood Global. Gentlemen, great to see you.
And yourself, Eric. Afternoon.
Afternoon. Neil, I'll start with you because I know exactly where Mark is, and I'm thrilled to talk about where he is because it's somewhere I really want to go in my life. But whenever we talk to you, you're always in some exotic location. Where are you today?
London. There you go. It's about as exotic. I'm in the office. One of the rare occasions that.
Yeah, absolutely. You ruined my plan. You ruined my plan. That's all right. You're a friend of the show. Mark, first time on the show, and I'm thrilled. You are in Austin, Texas. Am I right?
Absolutely. Yes. It's a little bit dull this morning, but the weather is picking up. Should be in the high 20s in Celsius today. So I hope someone in Aberdeen or London is not jealous.
We're even jealous of the fact that you're in Austin, Texas, because I hear it's one of the coolest places to live on the planet. That is fantastic. So welcome, Neil, Director of Market Intelligence at the Energy Industries Council, and welcome, Mark, Director of Subsea at Westwood. I love the fact that you're running Director of Subsea for Westwood Global in Austin, Texas. I just can't get over that. I think it's fantastic. If you don't mind, we're going to start with you, Mark, if that's okay.
Yes.
And you have a little slide deck you'd like to show us. Is it all right if I put it on the screen?
Absolutely.
Right. Let's see if this works. The wonders of modern technology. There we are. I'll go on to the first slide if that's okay, and you could talk us through that.
Yes, I think one of the things I'll just like to talk through today is a quick roundup of how we saw the market pan itself out in 2022, and then what we expect to see over the near term and over a 5-year forecast. It's very good to round up 2022 as we saw Subsea EPC contract value total 16 billion, and that represents a 14% increase year on year when you compare that to 2021. We saw over 290 Subsea 3 contracts awarded last year, and that is more or less a high since 2013. We also saw almost 2,400 kilometers of flexibles and approximately 5,000 kilometers of rigid lines. So despite the year-on-year increase, EPC contract value of almost 5 billion was, which was anticipated last year, was either delayed or cancelled. And you can see on the map on the right-hand side of the screen there, detailing some of those projects that were initially planned to be sanctioned last year, some of which were delayed into 2023, some of which were delayed even longer than that. A good example would be the Wisting project, which is Equinors, and the Gato do Mato project, which we currently anticipate could be sanctioned in 2024, while Wisting, I think Equinor did highlight that could be in 2026. And that is because as the market recovered from the COVID pandemic, we started to see significant inflationary pressures from the supply chain, while the war in Ukraine also meant that supply chain uncertainty. So some of the capacity erosion that we've seen over the last 7 to 8 years, post 2014, 2015 downturn, as well as during the COVID pandemic, is relatively not been restored, and that's why we see some of those supply chain challenges. But I think what we anticipate in 2023 and 2024 is that increase in supply chain prices will start to come down gradually, but we do not anticipate that would return to pre-pandemic levels within the next 2 years. As we've seen since the start of the year, prices of steel is beginning to come down. That would be more or less a welcome news for some of the equipment manufacturers, as well as shipyards for the fabrication of floating production systems, and that would continue to support project FIDs as well.
Very good.
If we move on to the next slide, please.
Very good.
So if we look at the slide, this is just a quick overview of how we see FIDs trending over the last few years and what we expect this year. We expect a slight uptick of close to 80 offshore upstream FIDs, and that is in comparison with 2022 and 2023, just an increase of 3 or 4 FIDs as expected. And we've seen a quick start to the year relatively with some of those FIDs highlighted at the top of the screen there as well. And we expect the first half of the year to be quite busy when it comes to FIDs, but that could relatively tail off towards the end of the year. But I think overall, it's also a very positive year. I think the market will continue to ride on the positive sentiment that was seen last year. And with more certainties around supply chain, with the supply chain more or less being creative in circumventing these bottlenecks and challenges that they face today, we expect the market to respond positively and have a relatively good order intake this year as well. So overall, we expect a number of activities in West Africa and Southeast Asia. But it's also good to mention at this point that even though the number of FID counts in West Africa and Southeast Asia is relatively high, in terms of contract award value, that will still sit in Latin America. So we expect Brazil to dominate the market. And obviously, ExxonMobil's investment in Guyana with the Uaru project expected to be sanctioned this half of the year is also expected to drive activities in 2023. If we move on to the next slide, please.
Mm-hmm. There we go.
So this is just a quick, I would say, overview of how we see the market shape itself out this year and next year. when it comes to Subsea 3 contract awards. So relatively, in terms of Subsea 3 units awarded, we expect more or less a balanced market when you compare 2022 and 2023, but a relative slight uptick in 2024. So short-term outlook remains very positive. We can see the demand for Subsea 3s continue to find itself within the Latin American region. Obviously, we spoke about Guyana earlier. There is also possibilities that Total Energies would move forward with the Block 58 in Suriname. Potentially, we think that is going to be in 2024. And there are a few projects as well in the Gulf of Mexico that could move forward. The North Platte, which was more or less delayed by Total Energies, which is now been picked up by Equinor and Shell, is something we believe in the near term, potentially in 2024. Trion, which is Woodside, is also another project we expect to go forward this year. And I think it's also good to highlight at this point that last year we saw a lot of activities in Western Europe. I think in Western Europe alone, we accounted for 24 FIDs. I would say actually in Norway specifically, we accounted for 24 FIDs, and that was because of the Norwegian tax incentives that was put in place during the peak of COVID, and that also accounted for well over 70 Subsea 3s sanctioned last year. But we do not expect to see that level of activities offshore Norway this year, although there are residues from those field development plans submitted last year, with some contracts expected to be awarded this year, some of which has been awarded. I think the Utsira High project was also awarded EPC contract earlier this year. So those are the kind of opportunities that we're seeing in Norway. Obviously, offshore UK, the big one remains Rosebank, and there are still conversations around how soon Campbell can also come out from a stalled phase into development as well. So looking at the market overall, we think it's quite robust. The suspect remains the same across the Atlantic margin. You can call them the Golden Triangle. And we are also tracking the Bay du Nord project offshore Canada, with some appraisal concluded earlier this year, more or less confirming additional resource, which then means project economics becomes much more interesting for Equinor to move forward with that particular project.
Very good,
well.
thank you.
I think the final slide will just be a quick summary of what we see in the marketplace. Inflationary pressures causing FID delays as E&Ps continue to more or less look at economics of their field, remodel some of those fields, and make sure that they would still make sense should oil prices fall below their current position. Demand for hydrocarbon continue to increase, more or less rebound back to pre-pandemic levels, which we saw happening in 2022, and we anticipate that would also continue in 2023. And if you look at Subsea 3 demand overall over the next 5 years, 2023 to 2027, we anticipate that is going to average over 260 units year on year, with the Americas accounting for 36% of that forecast.
And do you see that as, of those 260 units, do you see that as delayed delivery of backlog orders or new orders?
Those are new orders. So the demand we're referring to would be fresh orders. Some of these would be for greenfield, and some of this would be for brownfield. Also, some of the projects that have been delayed over the last 3 to 5 years, I think the list is more or less endless, would also be accounting for some of those units that we've mentioned there as well. However, should oil prices remain between $70 to $90 per barrel in 2023, we estimate that Subsea 3 EPC award will account for about 17 billion year on year, and should that oil price also stay above $65 per barrel over the 2024-2027 period, we believe that level of activity will be sustained over the forecast period as well.
Thank you so much for that excellent analysis and your key takeaways there, Mark. Fantastic. That was. I'm just going to put your slide deck off. Thank you so much for that, and thanks for being with us today. I'm just going to scoot over to Neil, if that's okay. Neil, I thought of a question for you this morning.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah,
Go for it.
I do most of my best work in the shower, and I thought if I ever met Neil face to face, I would ask him this question. So I'm just going to ask you, in terms of your core business at the EIC, providing the data that you do to your clients, has there been a change in the questions, and the context of the kind of data that your clients are now asking for of recent years? You know, with all that's happened in the world over the last 3 odd years, are your clients now asking different questions of you?
No, really, to be perfectly honest with you, Eric, no. But yes, yeah. So that's right. No, and yes. That's
No, but
a
yes.
confusing answer. So ultimately, what the clients are really still ultimately interested in and way to know is where are the opportunities. That is consistent, and that is ultimately what the supply chain wants to hear about. Where are those real business opportunities going to be? And I think Mark has set out the lay of the land absolutely brilliantly there from a Subsea perspective, in giving an indication of where the real opportunities are going to be in the future. You mentioned Brazil there, Mark, which is absolutely on the horizon, and we continue to see those same market interests. But what we are now beginning to see are organisations moving into those other sectors where there are synergies with the existing oil and gas sectors. So whether that be looking at hydrogen as an example, or carbon capture, we are now beginning to see the supply chain slowly making the move towards readying themselves for taking part in some of those major projects that are going to move forward. So that's the yes bit, I guess, there.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for humouring me with that one there. I just wondered if there was if that was a thing. Project data, you're always good on bringing us big sort of project data. What have you seen in the last month?
Yeah, no, thank you, Eric. And really, I think Mark's done a cracking job there of taking most of the projects that I was going to talk about. So I'll try and
scoring off.
I'll try and elaborate now on some of the other areas and actually some similarities. And in terms of early stage activity, Mark mentioned Gulf of Mexico and Trion. In Mexico, you've got Pollock and Chinwol oil fields there, and we've seen Doris recently being awarded a contract to carry out concept engineering for the subsea production system and surf scopes for that particular development. And we have also seen bids for the pre-feed work for the FPSO having been submitted there. In the Southeast Asia market, again, Mark mentioned that. What we see here, a new player, and this is the thing when you begin to look at the information and the data. Yes, Southeast Asia, you may typically think of your Petronas and Pertamina, but a player an organisation that some companies might not be familiar with, Conrad Petroleum. They've awarded 2 feed contracts for a gas project called Mako in Indonesia, and have recently awarded feed contracts to Synergy Engineering for a mobile offshore production unit, and Asia Tech Energy, who secured the surf feed contract for that particular project. One area that Mark fortunately didn't mention was the Middle East, and Mark actually mentioned some of the fact that projects are now beginning to move forward, and one of those projects where we'd seen several delays was Hail and Ghasha. Well, now we finally seen, and this is a $15 billion project. This is huge development going forward. We've finally seen some early engineering and procurement work contracts awarded here, and MPCC, along with Saipem and CPECC, has been awarded a $60 million contract that will include the preparing estimate for full project delivery scope, and they're looking at the offshore facilities that will include subsea pipelines, umbilicals, cables, and risers, as well as offshore processing plant and central living quarters. So that's the new field development side of things. Of course, Subsea, there's also decommissioning work, and one of the most sizable contracts that we've seen awarded over the last month was to DOF Subsea at the Heimdall decommissioning project, and they're going to have the EPRD contract for the subsea component of that decommissioning work.
Outstanding. So in terms of where we're going to see all the activity over the next year to 2 years, Where do you think we're going to see all the activity, and what specific markets and what market segments?
Yeah, well, South America was covered. Good stuff.
Tick.
West Africa, Angola, absolutely. I feel is probably going to be the one particular market that I feel certainly driven by the likes of Total, Chevron, and ENI, where we're going to see the activity. I think Namibia and South Africa are ones to watch, and it'll be interesting to see how those two markets proceed with their development. But Senegal, we are beginning to see Tortue coming towards phase one completion. BP, along with its partner there on the Teranga field, that is another project that could potentially reach FID. So there's plenty of opportunities, certainly on the West African side. I think Australia as well is a market that is definitely worth keeping one eye on. The Northwest Shelf specifically, where Chevron, Woodside, and Santos all have billion-dollar plus projects that are all proceeding. I think Asia Pacific, I've mentioned one project already, but there's several other projects in Indonesia and also Malaysia that are making headway. And I think another market of particular interest, and I'm really interested to see how this evolves because of some of the political issues in the area, is the East Med, Cyprus.
Yeah.
Some huge gas discoveries made in that particular area. You've also got some sizable discoveries offshore Egypt, that new discoveries that have been made, and as well Israel. So likes of Chevron, ExxonMobil, and it'll be interesting to see how they might advance those projects. As energy security, again, given the Ukraine-Russia war at the moment, that may mean that some of those projects might fast track. So I think they're certainly ones to watch.
Very good. And just your view on out with oil and gas, the wider energy sectors. Where do you see the opportunities in your world right now? What's coming clear to you?
Yeah. So thank you, Eric. There. So we've been doing quite a lot of activity recently as an organisation around floating offshore wind. In fact, did a session with ETZ last week up in Aberdeen, and what became very clear there was the huge number of opportunities that we're going to see move forward and that will present themselves to the subsea industry. We've got 48 gigawatts of potential of floating offshore wind that might, just for the UK, that could be installed. That's anything between 2,700 and 3,200 turbines. Each turbine needs to have anchors, it needs to have mooring lines. They're all going to have flexible cabling associated with them as well. There are huge opportunities here, and I think INTOG is a great opportunity for the subsea players to learn how they can operate in this particular arena. But I think closer, and potentially if all of the projects reach, or some of the projects reach final investment decision in 2024 as is proposed now, the carbon capture sector in the UK is one which could also represent opportunities, and it's the transportation and storage element specifically that would be of interest. There's going to be potential for new pipeline, the potential for new equipment, subsea equipment as part of that, but also the repurposing of some of the equipment and change out of some of the equipment there. So I think that carbon capture and floating offshore wind, and it's the transportation and storage element of carbon capture, are areas out with oil and gas that are going to present opportunities.
Very good, as usual. Fantastic. A lovely question in from Mark to Mark, I would say, because it probably speaks to the supply chain, the reductions in costs that you were possibly predicting into the future. Mark says, supply chain inflation was highlighted as a big challenge during the presentation. Are companies recognises that these cost increases and that it's having any effect on, do you see that as having any effect on project viability?
No, absolutely. I think you can easily roll off on the tip of your fingers a number of projects that were delayed last year, with the operators citing supply chain cost increases, wasting, Gato Domato, even Dorado, even the Woodside Trion was meant to be a 2022 FID, and that was delayed to this year. And you see operators going back and forth to the market where they continue to retender for projects. It's more like whipping the same horse over and over again, expecting something is going to change. And even in some cases, you've actually seen situations where they've almost proceeded to reaching FID, issuing letter of intent, limited notice to proceed, but then pulling back because the supply chain cost increase is not only about the subsea equipment, it's not only about the floating production system, but you also look at the drilling market. The rig market is almost going bonkers over the last 12 to 18 months. We are beginning to see day rates increase to levels that we were talking about in 2012, 2013, which is more like the height of the market. So supply chain inflation has definitely impacted projects going forward. The number is endless, especially when you look at the West African basin. Even I think recently Total Energies was talking about reactivating its development of the LNG project offshore Mozambique, but then also cautioning the supply chain to say if cost is significantly too high, we would definitely sit on our hands here. So we've actually seen operators sitting on their hands, hoping that things will change. And if you look at some of those projects where operators have given a revised development timeline, is more or less a forecast as to when capacity will become available, and the overeating within the market will start to reduce as well.
Gentlemen, always high quality from you guys and your organisations. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you want to extend the conversation, Neil Golden, Mark Adioson, get in contact. Thank you so much for your input today, guys. We'll see you later on.
Thank you.
Eric. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. We have reached the end of our show. Thank you so much for your questions and comments today, and thanks for joining us in the first place. It's the show would be nothing without you. I'd like to thank Neil Gordon from Global Underwater Hub, Ryan Gordon from National Subsea Centre, Tora Ernston from ProServe, Ian Roger from JNS Subsea, Neil Golding from the EIC, and Mark Adioson from the Westwood Global Energy Group for all of their insight today. So who got the prize? I've just been advised by the show's producers that the winner of our half-page advert or piece of editorial for their company is Mark Howson from LHR Marine for his question on the sourcing of people that he put to Neil Gordon. So congratulations, Mark. One of the team from OGV Energy will be in touch. That's how it works. It's as easy as that. It's fantastic. So we are going to say goodbye for today, but we're hoping that we're going to bump into you at Subsea Expo next week. And remember, if you want to come and relax, mingle with some more people, our networking event that we're having on Tuesday, the 21st of February at OGV Tap Room. We've got music. We're going to have wonderful cocktails. You can sign up for it here, www.ogvenergy.events. And you can come and join us and our sponsors and everybody else at a lovely networking event around about Subsea Expo. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to thank the show's producer Dan Hyland and the show's designer Ben Mackay. We look forward to seeing you all again next month on Thursday, March the 23rd at 2 p.m, where the theme will be something particularly close to my heart, asset integrity. So if you're sitting out there and you're in that asset integrity space, get a hold of Dan Hyland and say, I want to be on that show. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you again. Thank you and bye-bye.